All right, I'm doing my speech on Martin Luther King Jr., who was a civil rights activist in the 1960s. He actually spoke out against equality for blacks, and he also wanted equal for the poor. He didn't want wealth being distributed how it was back then. There was a lot of other civil activists that were with him that spoke out and that brought media attention. But the thing that made Martin Luther King Jr. so famous was that he actually brought it to Congress, and he was the first one and mainly the only one that brought it to Congress. He also took it because he was the one that always received the most violence in the protest. Everyone kind of targeted him because he was the loudest and the most outgoing through it. But he was definitely the most visible, and throughout the whole civil rights movement for about 10 years is about how long it took to get through all of it. And he actually became very famous when he spoke out against Rosa Parks, which I'll get into a little bit later, but that's what kind of brought him his national media attention. He attended Morehouse College, which was the college of both of his parents, and doing there, he studied more on Congress, and he actually focused his main studies on the best ways to get his letters to Congress, which really had nothing to do with his civil rights stuff or any of that. He just kind of read up on some of that on his own. And he actually, like I said, he took national spotlight when he spoke out against the Montgomery bus boycott, which was with Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat. And after he had spoke out towards that, actually him and Rosa Parks kind of teamed up through the civil rights, and she actually helped him and brought him even more media attention and helped him bring it to Congress. In 1957, he was actually elected to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which during that conference started out with about 50 people, and they actually traveled over 6 million miles and spoke to 2,500 different times. They spoke out against protest and action and concern and also justice when it comes to the poor and to the blacks. At the age of 35, Martin Luther King Jr. was the youngest to ever receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And when he received it, they offered him $54,000 in cash, which in the 1960s was a very, very lump sum amount of money. And he actually took it and gave it all to the civil rights furtherization. All the media attention, he put it straight into them. He didn't keep any of it. And he was living in severe poverty at the time, which most blacks in the 1960s were. And so $54,000 was a very lot of money to anybody back then, especially them. And so he took the $54,000 and gave it to the furtherance of the civil rights movement. He was actually put in jail over 29 times for acts of civil disobedience. And come to find out, none of the times he actually broke the law. It was just back then the police were also against blacks because it was all white officers for the most part. And they had a target towards Martin Luther King Jr. So every time he would protest, they would react by putting him in jail. And actually one of the times he was in jail, he wrote a famous letter, which is the letter in the Birmingham jail, which is one of the most famous in pretty much every history book, and you learn about it in history class. And that is actually his letter that sparked everything because it's the only one that actually reached Congress. He also had a famous speech called I Had a Dream in 1963, which is the speech you see on YouTube and on TV every day on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It became the most famous speech in U.S. history and still is to this day. And during his speech, he focused on upbringing the poor more than he did the blacks, but he also focused towards the end of his speech when he brought his kids up and saying that he didn't want his kids to be judged by the color of their skin rather than their character. And that speech has kind of been the drive for Martin Luther King Jr. Day from here on out. And he had tons of support until he actually spoke out against the Vietnam War, where he spoke that he did not think the U.S. should have got involved with it, and he actually lost thousands and thousands of supporters just by speaking out against it. And then after he gained national attention, Congress actually began taking an active role in guaranteeing equal rights for blacks and also guaranteeing more jobs for the poor and opening up more jobs. King wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in, and he was the main reason that blacks got their equal rights. But on April 4th of 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on the balcony of his hotel room in Montgomery. And that's pretty much the life of Martin Luther King Jr. I really enjoyed kind of doing the speech on him and studying up and learning more on him. And so I just thought to spread around what the life of Martin Luther King Jr. was. So thank y'all for watching.
Very good.